News today is that Michael Cohen has new evidence against the president. In a follow-up to his explosive testimony last week, Cohen today appeared before the House Intelligence Committee in an all-day backroom hearing. Here's Cohen.
Hearings went very, very well. I believe that all of the members were satisfied with the statements and the responses that I gave to them. I told them that any additional information that they would want, they should feel comfortable to reach out to my counsel, and I would continue to cooperate to the fullest extent of my capabilities.
Well, today's hearing was behind closed doors. Multiple reports indicated that Cohen showed up today with new evidence to back his allegation that the president's own lawyers edited his false statements to Congress in 2017. Cohen pleaded guilty to making that false statement to cover up the timing of the president's efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Here's Cohen last week saying that Trump's lawyers changed that key part of his false testimony.
Which specific lawyers reviewed and edited your statement to Congress on the Moscow Tower negotiations, and did they make any changes to your statement?
There were changes made, additions. Jay Sekulow, for one.
Were there changes about the timing?
There were several changes that were made, including how we were going to handle that message. The message, of course, being the length of time that the Trump Tower Moscow project stayed and remained alive.
Well, Trump attorney Jay Sekulow has denied that the president's legal team made those edits. However, NBC News is now reporting that Cohen today backed up his allegation with new documents that show edits to the false written statements he made to Congress. Not only that, but the New York Times has now acquired 8 of the 11 checks that the president used to reimburse Cohen for his illegal hush payments to Stormy Daniels. There they are. In other words, Cohen left a paper trail that could be a treasure trove for investigators. This comes as a new Quinnipiac poll shows that 64% of Americans, almost 2/3, say they believe the president committed crimes before he became president. The same poll shows that Americans view Michael Cohen, who pleaded guilty to lying, as being more honest than President Trump. Catch these numbers. 50% of Americans say they believe Cohen more than his former boss, while 35% say they believe the president over Cohen. So that's a bad number for the president. I'm joined right now by Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speer of California, who was in that House Intelligence Committee hearing today. Peter Baker, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times. Thank you. Donny Deutsch, Chairman Emeritus of Deutsch, Inc. Thank you all for different perspectives. Congresswoman, are you with the public on this that believes more of Cohen than you do of Trump?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
What about today? We're getting a report today that he doubled down on his charges that the president's lawyers, cutouts perhaps in this case, put there to do that, helped him lie to Congress. Your thoughts?
I would say that the documentation that he provided us today will help us come to the conclusions that we will need to make about whether or not there was an effort to manipulate the dates and the information. So I think that it's important to point Oversight Committee hearing and to this committee that he would make available the documents to support his positions.
What this tells the American people are two things today that you may have been able to get confirmed, probably did today in the backdoor hearings. Number one is that the president, while he was running for president, was basically all the time playing big shot businessman with Moscow, trying to build an empire building over there, a big landmark building in Moscow across the Red Square. At the same time, he's telling the American people he's going to be their true representative in dealing with a difficult country, Russia. We're also finding out that while he's president of the United States, meeting on the phone with Putin and others, being president, he's also signing checks on a regular basis to pay off for Stormy Daniels. All this is going on, this multitasking. What's it tell you?
Well, it tells me that this is nothing new for Donald Trump. It starts very young in his life, in which he was always trying to beat the system. And I think what we're going to find out over the next few months is that he's played every card to either suborn perjury and create a conspiracy to do so. I think what's going to haunt so many people that are associated with Donald Trump is what Michael Cohen said in open testimony, that if you don't watch out, you're going to be in the same position that I am, going to prison.
Do we have a basically dishonest man in the White House?
Without a doubt.
Let me go to Donny Deutsch on this thing about the way in which the president's lawyers, there were cutouts to people who had some distance from the president, I guess, for purposes of this, editing Michael Cohen's testimony to Congress with regard to the timing, especially of this work for the Trump Tower in Moscow. What do you make of his backing that up again today with documents?
First of all, I want to answer your question you asked the Congresswoman. You have a spectacularly criminal man in the White House. Anybody who's been in New York City for 20 years, I mean, in New York City, like I have known Donald Trump for 20 years, he is just dishonest and as slimy as they come. And this is just the beginning. As far as Michael, when people doubt Michael, anything he said, you have to go into his mindset going into this. Michael had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If he tells the truth, he gets a gold star, but he's still going to prison for 30 months. If he lies, now keep in mind, there's already been 70 hours with Mueller. There's been dozens and dozens of hours with the Southern District. There's been hours with Congress, hours with the Senate. The last thing he's going to come in and lie again, because he'll get more prison time. So when he says something in front of the American people, something as potent as basically they edited my statement, here was my statement, he's not lying. You know, use a little game of common sense. That man is telling the truth.
So basically, the president's supporting perjury here.
This will be, I believe, in the smallest of his crimes. And Chris, I've been saying this for a long time, that it's not going to be about Mueller. It's going to be about the Trump Organization, a criminal enterprise that will be RICO, the Racketeering Influence Corruption Act, about organizations like this that are crime organizations. Any way a person can lie and cheat and steal for his entire life, Donald Trump has. This is just going to be a pimple.
Hold that. The RICO statute was used against organized crime. It was written by the Congress so they could catch guys like a Capone character, a modern character in the syndicate, who basically sends signals through indirection, who talks like Trump does, who says, here's what is the truth as I hear it. So you give it the way I'm just giving it to you. It isn't like do this. It's this is the word we got to put out. So it's all by indirection. All this crime gets done by a lot of different people without the person's fingerprints being on them. He doesn't have his fingerprints on the gun. That's what RICO's about. And you say it applies here.
I think it's going to, basically, and Rudy Giuliani, ironically, was one of the first to use it. It's set up when you have multiple crimes. In the case of Trump, I believe it'll be bank fraud, money laundering, campaign finance, the Trump University, the foundation, the inauguration, tons and tons and tons, and the basic business practices at all. So you put them all together, and as you said, the center guy, the mob boss, is isolated. This takes that off the table, and he is responsible for all the crimes. The other piece to it, you can also take back assets. They can take his buildings away. I believe this is always going to end in the Southern District. They don't want to just take this guy out. They want to take him down. He tried to undo what our forefathers have done for 200 years and start to really send a signal about who we are as a country.
Tough stuff. Anyway, Peter, I want to talk to you, Peter Baker, the expert now. The New York Times reports your article today that the president's reimbursement payments to Michael Cohen are dated the same days he was attending to public presidential business. And one of the checks Trump signed was dated May 23rd, 2017, the same day he was overseas with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. There he is. That day he was signing checks to cover up for Stormy. Another check for Stormy is dated September 12th of that year, the day that Trump was hosting the Prime Minister of Malaysia at the White House. Another is dated the same day the president held the ceremony of Turkey pardon. Remember that Thanksgiving thing they do? And also spoke by phone with Vladimir Putin. Furthermore, one of the reimbursement checks issued by the Trump Trust, which was signed by the president, not signed by the president, was issued on February 14th of 2017. That's the same day Trump asked James Comey to drop his investigation of Michael Flynn. This intertwining of this prisoner's behavior, potentially criminal, in the small stuff of his affairs, his sexual escapades, whatever you want to call them. At the same time, he's dealing with the big stuff we're wondering about. What the hell's he doing with Putin? And why? And how does this relate to Trump Tower? It's all connected, and you show it's connected in time as well.
Well, it's very interesting, right? You see these parallel lives that he's leading while he's sitting president of the United States. It's not just that there was money paid to Stormy Daniels during the campaign. It's that he was still paying it off for the first year of his presidency. Once a month, he would sign a check for $35,000 to Michael Cohen to reimburse him for this money. And it did seem to coincide with just events on his calendar that show you, the dichotomy between a president acting as the head of state and a businessman who is signing checks to a lawyer because he's trying to fix some event that happened before and didn't want it to come out before the election. And these two parallel storylines really take you through his first year and I think kind of open a window into his, the complicated life he's been leading.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.